My summer holiday. Hello, I'm Mr. Snow. As you might imagine, I like cold weather. The colder, the better. Brrr. When I go on my summer holidays, I don't head for the sun. Oh no, not me. I like to go to places where there's lots and lots of snow. Like last year, when I visited the North Pole. There's nothing like lying on a snowy beach next to a frozen sea. Wouldn't you agree? Well, that was last year. This year, I went to stay with Mr. Sneeze, who, as you may or may not know, lives in a place called Shivertown. Sounds like my sort of town, doesn't it? When I got off the plane at Shivertown Airport, I heard a loud noise. Achoo! There it was again. Mr. Sneeze had come to meet me. Hello, Mr. Snow, said Mr. Sneeze. We walked through Shivertown to Mr. Sneeze's house. Along the way we met Mrs. Pod, the greengrocer. Good morning, Mrs. Pod, said Mr. Sneeze. No, it isn't, snapped Mrs. Pod, with a face as long as a wet weekend. Then we met Mr. Parcel, the postman. Good day, Mr. Parcel, said Mr. Sneeze. Rubbish, snorted Mr. Parcel, looking more miserable than a bear with a headache. What a lot of rude people, I said. It's always like this, said Mr. Sneeze. It's all this snow. It makes everyone unhappy. This, of course, sounded like a lot of nonsense to me, but then I do like snow. Hello, Mrs. Fix-It, said Mr. Sneeze to the Shivertown plumber. She's a very busy woman. She mumbled miserably, and trudged off through the snow. It was then that I decided that something had to be done to cheer everybody up. And lying in bed that night, I had an idea. Actually, I had plenty of time to think of one. Mr. Sneeze kept me awake for most of the night. Snore, a tissue, snore, a tissue. What a racket! Very early the next morning, I got up and hid behind the hedge in Mr. Sneeze's garden. Shortly, Mr. Parcel appeared, looking just as unhappy as he had done the day before. I picked up a large handful of snow and rolled it into a ball. Then, taking careful aim, I threw it. It was a perfect shot, but then I've had a lot of practice. The snowball knocked Mr. Parcel's hat off his head. He looked around angrily, but couldn't see anyone. I smiled and followed him into Shivertown. Mrs. Pod was opening her shop. She looked even more miserable than the day before, if that was possible. As Mr. Parcel walked past her, I threw another snowball and knocked off Mr. Parcel's hat again. "Who was that?" he said. "Not me," said Mrs. Pod. I was sure that I had seen just the smallest glimmer of a smile at the corners of her mouth. As she turned back to go into her shop, I threw a snowball at her. Mrs. Pod instantly thought Mr. Parcel had thrown it. I watched as she carefully made a snowball and threw it at Mr. Parcel. His hat was knocked off for the third time that morning. Mrs. Pod smiled. Then Mr. Parcel dropped his sack of letters and threw a snowball back at Mrs. Pod. It was Mr. Parcel's turn to smile. Mrs. Pod threw another snowball. This time she laughed, and Mr. Parcel laughed as he threw another one. Then Mrs. Fix-It came round the corner with a face like thunder. I threw a snowball at her and knocked her cap off. Seeing Mrs. Pod and Mr. Parcel's snowball fighting, she immediately thought it must have been one of them who had knocked her cap off. So she threw a snowball back. It hit Mr. Parcel and slid down his neck. Brrr! Mrs. Fix-It was now laughing as well. Then P.C. Button came out of the police station to see what all the noise was about. He couldn't believe his eyes when he saw what was going on. From my hiding place, I took careful aim and knocked his helmet off. Even he joined in the snowball fight. In no time at all Shivertown High Street was filled with people throwing snowballs. And you know what? They were all laughing. Even Mrs. Robe, the mayor, was out in the street throwing snowballs for all she was worth. They were all having so much fun that she declared a holiday for the whole town, and we all went sledging in the afternoon. That is, after I had shown them how. All they needed was a lesson in how to have fun in the snow. A lesson which I'm sure you don't need.
My name is Mr. Snow.